It began on a night that felt too quiet. Not the usual jungle hum, just silence dense and pressing. That's when Rango heard it. A faint melody floating in the air like smoke. No instruments, no voices, just a tune, beautiful and broken. It drifted through the trees, curling around him like cold fingers. Rango stood still, frozen by a song only he could hear. And something deep inside him started to sing back. He asked everyone, birds, foxes, owls, but none of them heard it. They blinked and shrugged. One even laughed. But the tune kept playing for Rango, soft and constant. Sometimes from the forest, sometimes from the walls. It wasn't just in his ears anymore. It was crawling inside his mind. A sound no one else could hear, or maybe a sound no one else survived long enough to speak about. Following the sound led him to an old dying tree, its bark black and dry like burnt skin. Beneath its roots, something was buried, a box, wrapped in chains and covered with strange carved marks. That seemed to hum. As Rango touched it, the melody grew louder, clearer, like a choir in reverse. His claws trembled, and still, he dug. He didn't wonder why, because something already told him what he'd find. Inside the box lay a violin, but not like any Rango had seen. Its wood was rotted black, its strings woven from something that looked like hair. As he lifted it, the air grew thick, almost solid, like breathing through cloth. A smell hit him, not of dust or age, but of decay and sorrow. The violin pulsed like a heart. Rango should have dropped it, but it already knew he wouldn't. The bow touched the strings, and a note rang out, hollow, sharp, and wrong. The walls shook. Shadows on the floor twisted and danced, forming faces that screamed without sound. Rango's ears rang, his eyes watered, but he kept playing. The tune had waited a long time to be heard again, and Rango had just struck the first key to something ancient and starved. Trees shouldn't breathe, but tonight they did. The leaves pulsed in rhythm, branches swayed, not with wind, but with music. Rango walked between them, violin in hand, the sound growing louder. The jungle no longer felt like home. It felt awake and hungry. The deeper he went, the more alive it became, and something was walking behind him. No footsteps, just breath. He paused. A distant scream rang out, but not from someone else. It was his voice, echoing from behind, then in front, then inside his own mouth. But it didn't match his breath. It was reversed, twisted, played backward like a broken recording. Rango turned, heart pounding. There was no one there, just the feeling that he was already being remembered. Where once stood a small village, now there was only ash. Dust floated where homes should be. Lanterns hung mid-air, flickering despite no wind. Toys lay untouched, some mid-fall, as if time had stopped. Rango stepped through it, careful, confused, until he realized there were no footprints. Not his, not anyone's. He wasn't visiting this place. He was trespassing in its memory. Inside an abandoned hut, a cracked mirror leaned against the wall. Rango looked in, and his reflection blinked late. Its smile was too wide, its hands too still. And behind that Rango, the violin played itself. Black tears rolled from its eyes. He stepped back. The reflection did not. It stayed still, and then it grinned wider, holding up one claw and tapping the glass from the inside. That night, Rango woke to music. The violin hovered mid-air, bow gliding on its own. Glowing notes spun through the room like tiny red sparks. His eyes widened as the shadows moved in sync with the tune, like dancers around a fire. One shadow turned and looked directly at him. It had no face, just a hole where sound bled through. And then it whispered his name. As the tune reached its next verse, the walls began to bend inward. Rango screamed, but the sound didn't leave his mouth. Instead, it curled back inside and became part of the music. Notes floated around him like claws made of ink. The floor cracked open, and a swirling vortex of sheet music dragged him down. Each page showed screaming faces, their mouths wide, their eyes gone. The violin's melody wasn't a song, it was a door. Rango fell into silence. A black stone chamber surrounded him, lit by floating orbs that pulsed in time, with a heart he couldn't hear. Frozen in the air were musical notes, hundreds of them. Drifting, lifeless, at the far end stood a grotesque conductor, its hands long and skeletal, its body wrapped in strings that twitched like worms. It didn't move. It only waited. And Rango realized it had been waiting for him. When Rango escaped, the forest had changed. Trees whispered to each other, their bark splitting into mouths with jagged teeth. Vines moved like snakes, coiling toward him. Each step he took echoed like a scream trapped in a bottle. He wasn't just walking a path, he was being guided. The song still played, but now it wasn't behind him. It was coming from inside the roots below. Every time Rango turned back, the path ahead was the same crooked tree, same whispering leaves, same melody. He tried running, clawing at the air, but the loop didn't break. And then it hit him. He wasn't trapped by the forest. He was trapped by the tune. It didn't want him to move forward. It wanted him to play again and again until the melody became all he remembered. Rango pulled a page from the violin case. The musical notes shifted as he stared, and shapes began to form between the lines. Eyes, noses, wide, gaping mouths frozen in silent agony. They weren't drawings, they were trapped. Hundreds of them, each twisted in terror. One face looked just like his, the ink blood from the paper, dripping down his claws as the page whispered, "You're next." He sensed it before he saw it. A figure, tall, slender, no face, no color, just a suit of black stitched from something not fabric. It stood behind trees, behind shadows, behind dreams, but it only appeared when the violin played. Rango tested it. Silence made it vanish. One note, and it was back. A silent watcher, a collector, and it was getting closer with every bow stroke. Rango's claws trembled as he played, not from fear, but from pain. The strings had sliced his fingers. Black blood dripped, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. The violin seemed to demand more. The more he bled, the sweeter the melody became. And now, the song echoed through the trees with a hunger that matched his own fear. He realized this wasn't a tune to remember, it was a tune meant to feed. The sky flipped, stars reversed, and the moon, once full, now hung upside down, dripping black mist that rained upward. Rango looked around, but the world was no longer real. Trees floated, rocks hovered, the violin hummed softly from his back, and each note bent reality like glass and fire. Gravity didn't work here, time didn't work here, but the song was louder than ever. He entered a hall carved in silence. Statues lined the walls, animals with their ears covered, mouths open wide, not in song, in horror. Their stone eyes seemed to follow him, and in the center of them all, a statue of him, perfect, recent, its claws still wet with blood. Rango backed away slowly, but the statue of him began to hum. The same cursed melody, the tune that turns listeners into monuments. One of the violin's strings broke, not with a twang, but with a shriek, like tearing flesh. From the snap came smoke, black, thick, alive. It coiled around him, whispering in voices he didn't recognize, but that somehow knew his name. They told him what the final note would do, that the tune was a key, that playing it meant becoming part of it, and that once begun, it must finish. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. He clutched his throat, but nothing worked. The violin still sang, but he was silent. Then he saw it. A symbol burned on his neck, a glowing mark pulsing in time with the violin's rhythm. Rango had not just played the cursed tune, he had joined it, and now his voice belonged to the melody, forever muted, but always heard in the song's next victim. His limbs jerked, his eyes rolled. The violin floated before him, its bow moving without touch. Rango's body danced like a puppet, every joint twitching to the rhythm. He watched himself from inside, helpless. His thoughts screamed, but his mouth stayed shut. Round him, the ground cracked, roots split open, and the world screamed in harmony. He was no longer a player, he was the instrument. In the clearing stood rows of ghostly animals, transparent, decaying, eyes wide and unblinking. All sat perfectly still as Rango played for them. Not one moved, not one blinked. Their mouths were sewn shut, yet they smiled. The forest grew quiet. The tune changed. This wasn't music anymore. It was ritual. Rango wasn't performing. He was conducting something older than life itself. He reached the final note, a single glowing symbol on the page. Every instinct told him not to play it, but his claws moved anyway. The moment the bow touched the string, the air tore apart. The sound wasn't music, it was pain. It cracked. The sky split the ground, and Rango felt his soul stretch. The tune had waited eons to be completed, and it chose him to be the final note. The world halted, leaves froze mid-fall, rivers stopped, even the wind held its breath. Rango hovered above the earth, body limp, eyes wide. Round him, shattered pieces of time floated like glass, each one showing different versions of him. Some smiling, some screaming, some missing entirely. The violin burned into his chest. The song was done, but the silence it left behind was worse. From the silence came a presence, towering, twisted, made of melted wood and rotting string. Hundreds of eyes blinked across its body. Its arms were bows, its mouth a wide grin made of broken keys. Rango stared, paralyzed. This thing had written the tune, not to be heard, but to be obeyed, and Rango had played it perfectly. Rango's claw trembled and struck one more note. A mistake, a whisper that wasn't meant to exist, and the world split open, not cracked, shattered. Beneath the ground was nothing, just blackness. Screams, hands reaching up. That extra note didn't end the tune. It awoke something the melody had kept asleep, something that never wanted to be remembered. He now played on a floating stage, suspended in the void. Around him drifted hundreds of empty chairs, slowly spinning in silence. No audience, no sound. Just Rango, alone. The violin glowed white-hot. The bow moved without him. He realized this was forever. The cursed tune didn't end with a scream. It ended with an eternal performance. For no one, and for everything. Back in the jungle, the violin lay on his chest. Rango's eyes were closed, peaceful. Flowers bloomed around him, then withered. Time seemed to respect his silence, until a breeze picked up, carrying the first note again. The forest bent, shadows twitched, and somewhere, something smiled. Rango may have stopped playing, but the song had never really stopped. A young animal wandered the jungle, curious, naive. Their paw brushed something resting in the leaves, the black violin. A distant tune reached their ears, gentle, sad, beautiful. They picked it up, turning it slowly in their paws, and behind them, unseen in the dark, the trees leaned forward. The melody began again, and the curse welcomed its next note.